All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of It Is. Well, this is a special actually feature presentation of It Is What It Is. This is ABC Chat starring my friend, my homie, my business partner, just everything, Alexander Brotman. I'm so excited to be reconnected. We don't always get a chance to do an episode, but we try to come at least monthly with an episode of ABC Chat. So I have with us my friend, like I said, just amazing sales executive, ABC Chats, premier host, Alexander Brockman. If you can see, connect with him at the link below. I got his lower third together, so you connect with him. Then I'm looking forward to this episode. He has an amazing guest that he invited on this show, Eduardo Alvarez, and I'm so excited for this episode today. With that being said, I'll turn over to my friend Alex. Alex, take it away.
Hey, welcome back to the ABC Chats podcast, everybody. So this is a fun show that there's been a lot of people talking about, and a lot of people that have been kind of reaching out to everybody, kind of asking some specific questions. And one of them was, can you guys talk about the difference between personal branding and corporate branding? And so Cody and I were chatting about this, and you remember, and we were like, there's really only one person that we can bring on here to talk about this. And that person, luckily accepted our invitation. So that person is sitting in front of us. It's Eduardo Alvarez. And so after, Eduardo's got a rich history in this spectrum. And, after completing his undergraduate education at New York's Fordham University, Eduardo started his career working for the government of Puerto Rico, leading the office in Boston. And after 1 year of working in the private sector, he was offered a position with the Bank of Boston as an international banker, working in the Americas, working in Africa, working in Europe. And then after about a decade in banking, took all of those professional skills and strategic branding expertise into kind of the design world. And Eduardo specialized in helping financial institutions and basically become more competitive in understanding the mechanics and the mindset of branding, all the things that we're going to be talking about now. But over the last 5 years, Eduardo, after completing a change leadership graduate program at Columbia University in New York, Eduardo is focused on his energies on developing culture and executive coaching engagements in a variety of businesses and non-for-profit organizations. And so I don't know what else, what other room there is to go fill in there, Eduardo, but let everybody know, just anything that I missed. Did I botch it? Did we get it all right? How's that sound?
Not at all. So perhaps a little too much.
But I mean,
but I'm old, so I mean,
Midwest called Newground, and so there was several different companies that Newground has in its holding company, but we were all part of either Newground or Adrenaline. And so that's where all of us had met. And I've worked with Eduardo countless times. We've gone to some of the most rural portions of the Midwest together. And so bringing this and then bringing, Eduardo, the New York, Eduardo Alvarez, it was very entertaining to see people's reactions to just kind of the experience and the expertise and all these different things. But it was truly probably 2 of the best years of my life working with Cody and working with Eduardo and kind of learning from these just savvy professionals. And when Cody and I were talking about, okay, so how do you break down the difference between what does it actually mean to have branding? What is that for that, Eduardo? When somebody says that, when somebody says, what is branding? What does that mean? What's like the technical definition of branding? Are you able to share that with us?
before I do, I'm going to turn the tables around and ask you a question.
Ooh.
It's, think a little bit, the concept of brand and branding, and I'll explain that in a minute.
Okay.
When do you think it surfaced among humans?
When do I think branding surfaced among humans? Man.
Just quick one.
First century.
First century. You were off by 2,800 years. Branding first surfaced with the Egyptians.
Really?
Basically by marking cattle to make sure that your neighbor didn't steal your cows.
Interesting.
branding goes all the way back. And the same way that they did it with cattle, then, when you get to the brand, and there's confusion about brand and branding. I'm going to give you, it's a mind for about 25 years. And I am a believer in borrow, steal, and adapt. Because, there are, no such things as completely new ideas.
Right.
And, but one of my favorite branding gurus is a guy in New York that worked here for many years by the name of Alan Adamson. And he distinguishes between brand and branding, which I thought it was very well done. Brand being a collection of associations that lives in your brain. And, and they're there because of all the stimuli that you get from the outside world. If I say Coca-Cola, something pops up. If I say Tylenol, something else pops up, or Apple, or United Way. So really, it are those images of, a product or a service or an organization, for that matter. So that is the brand, the concept of brand. Concept of branding is really about developing a process of creating what he calls signals. And it's those signals that trigger then, that's those associations that are in your brain. So there are two different things. One is brand as such as that stamp, if you will, and branding is what happens. Be a logo, that could be corporate colors, that could be storytelling, that could be TV ads, whatever it is. Those are the signals that trigger, that concept of brand. But the most important thing is that together, the ultimate reason or the ultimate goal for brand is really to meet a critical need. And I think that works for corporations, and that also works for the personal branding that you were talking about, a few minutes ago. So that, in essence, is where I start, my work as a brand practitioner. I don't like to use the word consultant. Too many consultants in the world, and not enough practitioners. So, that's where I come from in terms of brand.
How does a company, go about the process of establishing their brand? What is there, kind of a blueprint, or there mechanics to it? What's that like? Can you describe that for us?
Yeah, that's where the practitioner comes in.
Okay, there it is.
It's if you will, and in all my years doing this for different types of companies, but especially financial institutions, as you mentioned before. And I know that when we're talking, preparing for the for this program, we talked about 5 different phases, and rethinking it later on, I said that's getting too complicated.
Ooh, got a fresh set of ideas coming.
I've basically come up with 3 different levels.
Okay.
Most of my colleagues will do something like this, whether it's 3 or 5 or 8. There has to be a process. And I like to call it mechanics, because the mechanics is something that implies strength, force, change, movement. And that's one of the most important things in branding, especially in today's world, movement. If a brand is static, a brand dies. A brand has to live on. And it's so the 3 categories in my mind when I start a project, the first one is what I call the analytic, the second, and the third, the developmental. So then it's a mouthful, but bear with me, and I'll try and make it as simple as possible.
Perfect.
The analytic is when I go as a practitioner with a team, much like you and I went to teams in Iowa, and and we learn the business of the client. That's role number one. Learn the business plan, learn the business model. You don't have to be an expert. It's if the business is growing corn, but you should know something or other about how the farming works.
It'll help.
It will help. So and the way to learn about the business is by taking a deep dive with the people in the company, not just the C-suite, but also with key staff members, because the C-suite will give you one perspective, the key people in the company will give you another, and goes out and does some kind of brand audit. So go out and look at what the company has, what the market has that projects that particular brand. And again, from logos and corporate colors to different taglines to merchandising to advertising, you name it. Wherever the brand exists, you go and take a look and grab examples, take photography, go into the websites, examine the social media, because that is very, very important this day and age. So the brand audit. And then the third one is about customer and market research.
Got it.
And that's very important because that is the other part of the equation, is listening to what the consumer is saying, what the customer is saying about the company, but also about the industry. So you learn a great deal. Sometimes my clients have had already some kind of research done, which is great, and we take it back with us and then we dissect it. Have to make sure that research is not more than 18 months old, because then it gets real old, because the consumer world changes very rapidly. The other thing about the market research is that we try not to get bogged down in the details, especially if you have research companies doing, you have tons of quantitative data, and that can twist your head and sort of prevent you from really looking at the real insights. So that is the analytical part.
Okay.
The business model, the brand audit, and then the research.
Got it. So that's the mechanics of kind of,
Yeah, and so we bring that to our company, to our shop, as you will, and because that is going to be very, very instrumental in working through whatever the brand issue is going to be. The second phase is what we call the strategic. And there you start working in tandem with the client. That we do, and you've seen this before, is get a group of senior people in the company, and as well as the branding team, and spend a day or two in some kind of an ideation session.
Got it.
And the ideation session, what it really does is that it examines all the data that has been collected to that point, but also gives an opportunity for the company and the team, the practitioner team, to discuss where does we want that brand to go. It's all sorts of ideas will come out of that, and again, we take that back to our shop and then start doing the real thinking. And we have to come up with two basic deliverables. One has to do with what is the brand idea? What is the brand going to be? What are you going to be known for in the marketplace? It's probably the easiest way to do it. And then based on that brand idea, then we go into the brand signals, which is how do you translate that into all the things that are going to expand your brand in the marketplace. Like I mentioned before, everything from websites to social media to traditional media to brochures, to, whatever it is that has
Everything.
your imprint in, because you weren't listening to the people
Right.
that are going to be the ones responsible.
Right.
So I learned my lessons years ago, and working hand in hand in partnership with the client is absolutely imperative for the success of branding program.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense so far?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, just like the lesson that you said, it kind of sounds exactly like, traditional processes going from, back in the Industrial Revolution, let's figure out what we're going to do. We'll go away and we'll do it. And then we'll come back and we'll deliver it to you, is now switching more into this, for the last 20 or 30 years, it's been switching more to the agile methodology where, the professional services, the practitioners are working in tandem with owners from the client side, and their engagement owner that is really, kind of, that has the ability to sign checks, that has the ability to make decisions, that has the ability to make the calls, because that's going to be something that helps the efficiency of the process, that also helps, make sure that, just like you said, you don't go away and then you come back and say, look at all this amazing stuff that we did. And they say, I have no idea where you came up with any of this, because that does not resemble us.
No, and that didn't happen a lot, but it has happened. I think you learn, which is what I call developmental, and that has two parts. One I call the pull in, and the other one the push out, which are cutesy terms for basically saying an internal launch and an external launch. Internal being the
Right.
people that need to live the brand on a daily basis, and external obviously is your consumer and your market at large. Now, it's interesting that the pull-in and that cultural part, we didn't pay a lot of attention to it for many years. I'd say it's only in the past 5-7 years that some of the larger firms started to really pay attention to that, to the internal development of the brand, because they realize that it affects everything that happens. And ultimately, everything that happens inside a corporation is projected somehow or other, sometimes even through osmosis. It's when you walk into a place and you know that people don't feel comfortable talking to you or selling to you or whatever it is, if people are not trained, are not engaged with the brand, they will not be able to do that. So, the study of what a corporate culture is, and that, internal launch and development of the brand has become one of the big things. And that was one of the reasons actually I went back to graduate school and did some studies on, organizational behavior and change management. Because at the end of the day, if you're going to keep a brand alive, you're going to have to change as time goes by. So, that is, one of the most important parts that we had missed in the past, but now I think a lot of people are taking very, very seriously. It's how do you engage the staff? It's whether it's a corporate staff or you have, plants or retail stores, whatever it is. Everybody should be in many ways singing from the same hymn book here. And that's what then creates that brand culture. And a lot of the work I have been doing the past few years deals more with that and the coaching of executives to make sure that all the pieces are pulled together in creating, that internal way of doing things.
That makes sense. Eduardo, let me hit you with this. You mentioned keeping the brand alive by producing activity, right? The brands cannot stay static. If you're static, you will die. Change movement, right? When we look at change movement, obviously, I think that 2020 has been one of the most externally external producing factors that should initiate some type of change, right? From a global pandemic into the uncovering of transparency within social activity or social justice. So how do brands, well, I guess it's a two-part question. The first part is, have brands woken up? Have they awakened to the state that they have to respond to societal factors? And then the second part is, has that awakening, if it has happened, has it been enough? And we'll start with there.
I wish I had a crystal ball and, to answer that last part of the question. But I think in looking out in the marketplace and talking to people and going to webinars and all the things we have done during the quarantine, I'm seeing certain trends. One is that, brands that take it seriously are looking at the short term, and then they're looking at the long term. The long term, and obviously they come together. But as you well said, I mean, we are in a confluence of pandemic, recession, and the whole racial justice issue, which I think it has gone up to the level of the other two. So, I mean, we have to really, contend with all three at the same time. And so companies need to come up first and foremost with messaging that is authentic and that is believable, to put out there. And then follow that with actual, acts, just simple things. I had a problem with, and I had to consult an orthopedic surgeon a few years back, and I go for checkups and so on. Well, now every 2 months, I get a newsletter from that practice, and the newsletter addresses actual issues of people in that, in their area of expertise, particularly because people are spending gazillion hours in front of a screen, zooming left and right, sitting instead of standing. They had never done that before. I actually read it when I get it. I said, wow, these guys are really thinking ahead of the game.
Right.
It's the way advertising has changed. It's more, about what people need as opposed to what people want. Because at the end of the day, the way that consumers react has changed dramatically. It's there was an article, I don't know, yesterday in the Times or the Washington Post that talked about the business in this country of gentlemen's clothing. It has been totally decimated because people don't need suits, don't need formal shirts.
That's true.
Need ties, don't need expensive shoes. I remember one time in my life when I was a banker, I had 10 suits, 50 red ties, 6 pairs of shoes, and I don't need any of that anymore. So, I mean, it's what some brand practitioners are calling that the go-to brands are the ones that are going to thrive in the future, the ones that offer things that you are going to need. It's for the moment, we're in a crisis, so the wants are not so important. Is that where you were going, Cody?
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess the creating an authentic message and then actually having an implementation strategy that follows. Do you think corporations are forced to respond out of pressure instead of out of authenticity? And if that is the case, what therefore, or what is the solution? Should there just be a complete overhaul of the system? I mean, like, where do we start? So is it pressure to respond based off of societal external factors, or is it real authenticity?
Well, hopefully, a
Right.
lot of the brands are already authentic.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, let's take for granted that X%. Well, I think that X% is going to face some serious problems in the future. It's because people see through. Consumers see more than we give them credit for. Even brand practitioners like myself and my colleagues, they really can. That's why they gravitate towards certain brands. That's why they gravitate towards Southwest Airlines. They trust Southwest to get me from point A to point B in the United States of America. And that's very important. They trust uh, Apple, of course.
Mm-hmm.
They may be, scream and yell, it's because of the pricing, or we have another iPhone, we're in the iPhone 27 and a half. But at the end of the day, they do gravitate because they know that they're authentic and they have the consumer's best interest in mind. So I mean, those companies will have to probably, twist their business models somehow, or somewhat, depending on how things move in terms of the pandemic, the economy, and some of the social issues. But it's people will see through. If a company is not authentic.
Yeah, I think that authenticity goes two ways. And Cody, you let me know if there's anything else that comes to mind. But like at the start of the pandemic, and there's two examples. One example, at the start of the pandemic, it looked like one agency basically did ads for quite literally every different company. And I posted about it on LinkedIn. It looked like every company had the same, hey, we're all in these uncertain circumstances.
Right.
We're all in this together. We're here for you. Just let us know. And it looked like and there were big names in there. There was, there was a ton of people in there. And then there's also, kind of the same thing that happened when, sort of some of the Black Lives Movement stuff started happening earlier this year. There was just similar messaging. And so I think that's where, Eduardo, I think, and you let me know if I'm wrong, but that authenticity, if it just sounds like what everybody else is saying, even though you may mean it, it doesn't really seem authentic because it's getting lost in what everybody else is already saying. Cody, was there anything else that anything that Eduardo was saying that jumped out at you?
Yeah, I think it's I do think there are similar patterns to how the message is being communicated. I also think that when you don't have a solution, you look for the answer that will create less havoc, right? So, and what I mean by that is like, well, because we do have on an organizational level a lack of diversity, we have this, or we don't have this addressed. We answer it by not making ourselves look terrible. So it's the lesser of the two options. And I think that's where that similarity comes in. That same monotone voice is almost like the same Allstate guy, for every insurance company, right? Right. And I think it's obviously it's the safe way to go about it. Right. But it also shows inherent distraction and weakness. And Eduardo, we'll close with this. And last question: future branding. Is this the ultimate age of disruption? Are you too big, or is it still you're too big to fail?
Well, remember, we've been saying that everything is too big to fail for for decades, in one way or another. This is, I think, a more important crisis than I have seen in my lifetime. It's and I have been in the working world for 4 decades. I have been through recessions. I have been through 2008. this is different and has a different feel because it's not only economic, it's also health, and it's also societal. And all have come together. It's and I think that the companies that will succeed are the ones who can bring these together in a way that is authentic. And it will mean that you're going to have to start looking at different business models or different ways of approaching consumers. And I'll leave you with something that a friend of mine gave me the other day that I thought it was very, very poignant. Everybody knows, the Ford Foundation. One of the largest foundations. I think it's the second largest. They have like 13 billion in endowment and so on. And this day and age is being led. The top guy, the CEO, is an African American. So he looks at things a little bit differently. And one of the things that they have done over the past 2 months in response to the pandemic is instead of giving money away, and taking it out of the earnings of, the money they already have in the bank, they went out and for the first time, this is a social agency, by the way, this is a nonprofit. They raised $1 billion in bonds. They issued a bond for $1 billion called a social bond to utilize that money to deal with COVID, Black Lives Matter, and the economic. That is twisting a business model around.
Absolutely.
And I haven't been able to stop thinking about, I'm sure there was a lot of thinking and, it's brainstorming or whatever it was, but they're doing something completely different that has immediate effect on what is happening today. Now, let's see whether our corporate friends can match things like that.
That's impressive.
Awesome. Well, look, we appreciate it. This has been an amazing episode. Eduardo, where can they connect with you? What are you doing?
What am I doing? Doing executive coaching and some consulting, but mostly executive coaching, and especially around the areas of corporate culture. It's working with a lot of C-suite type personalities, which is always interesting. And even more interesting is because of communications and technology. I've had clients in Africa. I've had clients in Europe. I have clients in South America, as well as here in New York, which makes it not only diverse, but much more interesting and a rich mix of people, especially in the day and age that we're in.
Right. And your travel expenses are way down.
Right.
Way down.
Hey, I was gonna. Hey, right, Alex, where can they connect with you? What are you doing, man?
You know that pretty much the best place to find me is on LinkedIn. So it's LinkedIn A Brockman or Alex Brockman at CSG. That's pretty much where I spend the vast majority of my day is connecting with people and engaging in conversations and building a network on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Look, connect with these amazing gentlemen. My friend Alice, connect with Eduardo. These guys are really subject matter professionals in their field. Hit them up on LinkedIn. That's the easiest way to connect with them. Thursday, have an amazing episode really dealing with sports and their reaction to social justice surrounding the shooting of Jacob Blake. I have Terry Cummings coming on, ex-Milwaukee Bucks player. I have waiting on Kendall Gill to let me know yay or nay, but I'm just throwing them out there now. At Will Gill, he's a podcast hosted on Chicago Sports Next. Just a few. I also have the chaplain or former chaplain for the Chicago Bulls. So I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be amazing. Connect with my friends. Until next time, guys. Thanks.
Thank you.